Commissioner Banks,
Here.
Commissioner Hassler,
Here.
Commissioner Schwerin,
Here.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Here.
Thank you. And welcome, Brian Ashworth, to the board. We're very pleased to have you here and look forward to working with you. And I'd like to, on behalf of the board, thank Mark Gertner for his service on the board. He left last month, and we appreciate all of his time and dedication. The board would also like to have a moment of silence for Mr. James Brady, who passed away on April 24th. Mr. Brady worked in the local media at KMOX at Fox 2 prior to serving on the Board of Police Commissioners as Secretary and Information Director from 1974 to 1996. After his time with the board, he continued to serve in St. Louis County government through other roles. Thank you. A few other notes on behalf of the board. The Police Foundation had a fundraiser on Monday that was very successful. The board would like to thank the foundation and all of its supporters in that effort. May 10th through 14th was Police Week, and we honor those who pay the ultimate sacrifice. May they never be forgotten. Our department will be doing something in the fall to honor the fallen and their families. Kudos to the St. Louis County Police Crime Laboratory. They had a very diligent response in assisting the Major Case Squad in tying together 2 homicides this month that otherwise had no similarities or connections. Charges were issued and an arrest was made in a case from 1989. The St. Louis County Police Crime Lab and the cold case investigator from the Bureau of Crimes Against Persons are commended for their unwavering dedication in the pursuit of justice. The 3rd Precinct was instrumental in responding to a 4-alarm fire at Manor Chemical Plant in Afton Southwest Precinct on April 29th, 2021. Citizens within the explosive danger zone, which was a 1.5 mile radius of the location, were contacted and evacuated by members of the 3rd Precinct, and we commend them for their dedication. I'd like to move on to our open discussion and start with the deputization of Washington University police officer. Mr. Freeman.
Seat up.
Please come. And raise your right hand. Repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Rodney Kirkland,
Do solemnly swear that I am a citizen of the United States.
that I'm a citizen of the United States.
That I will support
That I will support
the Constitution and the laws of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws of the United States,
the state of Missouri,
the state of Missouri,
and the charter and ordinances of St. Louis County.
and the state and ordinances of St. Louis County.
That I will faithfully adhere to the regulations
Faithfully adhere to the regulations
provided in the rules and procedures for deputization
provided in the rules and
procedures
procedures of the deputization
as adopted
as decided
by St. Louis County.
by St. Louis County.
And that I will faithfully
That I will faithfully
demean myself
do myself
as a deputized officer
as a deputized officer
of the St. Louis County Police,
as a St. Louis County Police.
so help me God.
So help me.
As a deputized officer for St. Louis County, your authority is restricted to the protection of persons and property on the Washington University campus. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We will now move on to an update on our budget.
Hello, I am Joyce Hill with the Fiscal Services Unit, and I just have a quick overview of our financial situation. So our original budget is $155 million, and so far we have spent $59 million. So we're very much on track, steady as we have budgeted. The only areas of real concern right now are always, overtime is always under budget, but we're doing pretty good there. It seems to be holding steady. The other issue might be our vacation and sick time payout when somebody retires or leaves. We pay them their balances, and this year has been, we've had a lot of retirement, so it's kind of high, but that's not unusual, and we will address those as they occur. We always use our salary surpluses to cover shortages, and it looks like that's going to be the same and okay so far. Everything else is holding steady, and right now we're working on the 2022 budget process. I've sent out information to everyone to respond to me for things that they may need for next year, and I'm getting ready to get all that together, but I don't have anything ready. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a crime statistics update.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Van Wert. I'll be talking about our crime statistics. I need to be able to share my content still, so give me 1 second. I apologize for the delay. So in the last month, year to date, our gun crime victims specifically, we have a slight increase compared to last year. That's mostly due to an increase in aggravated assaults compared to the same period last year, though we also have had a large increase in homicide victims this year. Everything else is, it's up for the year. It's still kind of early though. It's hard to say what these patterns will look like as the year progresses. So for our crime data, as I mentioned, our homicides are up for the year, as are our aggravated assaults with firearms. As you can see, overall, our aggravated assaults are pretty much the same as they were year to date last year. However, for aggravated assaults with firearms, at this point last year, we had 208, and this year we're at 239. So we still have an increase there. As for property crimes, not a lot to really discuss here. We're seeing decreases in some things, and that's good. The only thing we've really seen an increase in so far this year is destructions of property. I'm not really sure why that is at this point, but most everything else we're seeing decreases for property crimes. And for crimes against society, we've been having more drug and narcotic violations so far year to date. That's likely just due to the fact that our officers are engaging more in the community again. We have people on Metrolink again, and those are often self-initiated by officers. Calls for service, these are pretty much the same as always. The moving averages are pretty consistent with the calls that we're seeing month by month. And the same for self-initiated activity. I didn't see anything here that really jumped out at me. Finally, traffic stops are starting to increase again as COVID restrictions have lifted or been reduced. We have been doing more traffic stops. So we're kind of getting back to pre-COVID numbers of traffic stops. Right now, our percent minority versus percent white in the various precincts is not too off of what the population is for most precincts. But that's something we'll continue to keep an eye on as the year progresses. Are there any questions?
I know we switched over to the new method of tracking data. I believe it was it January of 20?
That's correct, yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a way that we could look at a 3-year moving average or a 5-year moving average? Do we have those numbers that would make a meaningful comparison?
So we can do that comparison with the old accounting method. We cannot do it with the new accounting method. And we do look at that information with some of the crime types, such as aggravated assaults and homicides, on pretty regular basis. And those, we've just been seeing a really steady increase in aggravated assaults, particularly with firearms, over the last 10 years or so. It's just slowly gotten higher every year. For regular aggravated, or for other aggravated assaults with other weapons, knife cutting, or with hands, feet, and fists, we've seen that the numbers on those stay really consistent. As for property crimes, those have actually decreased over the last 10 years. If you look at it as a summary style as opposed to the NIBR style. Overall, our crime numbers have stayed relatively consistent. I can give you those specific numbers next month if you'd like to see them. That's no problem.
I would be interested.
Okay.
I got a question. The slides that we went through were pretty informative, but pretty quick. Is it possible that we can actually get those sent to us maybe by email so we can look at them in a little more detail?
Yeah, I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Actually, in general, if you could send those slides to us a day or two before our board meeting, so we could.
Really good.
Yeah, that's no problem. I will tell Lieutenant Hampton to make sure to do that in the future months.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Are there any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is an update on the RFP for a D&I consultant.
Good morning. Welcome, Commissioner Ashworth. I'll be real brief. I want to maintain the cone of silence that has been heavily impressed upon us by the procurement department in the county. They're doing a good job. Patty Reuter is assisting myself, Captain Man, Sergeant Nichols in the process. We've completed all the interviews of the vendors. The 2 chiefs participated in the second round of interviews as subject matter experts, not as voters. We will be submitting our votes shortly, the 3 voters, and then Patty will move that process forward. We'll probably likely have some negotiating with respect to price and so forth. And I don't want to predict any type of time frame so that anyone would misconstrue what I'm saying, but I think we're pretty close to finalizing the whole aspect and then wrapping it up with a contract for a consultant.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions?
Not passed yet. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is an update on our work with Teneo. And I believe Chief Oates is on to provide a few words.
Good afternoon. With me, joining me is Loretta Hill is with me as well, and our Courtney Adante is also, I believe, listening, and I'm not sure she has access to speak. But on behalf of Teneo, we're very happy to be invited here and give you a quick update on our efforts. As you know, we delivered our report in December. In early April, the business community re-engaged with Teneo for the purpose of an implementation phase with regard to our recommendations that we had made with both the city PD and the county PD. And we've begun that effort. We were, Courtney Adante and I were out in St. Louis County for a visit, met with Chief Barton and her senior staff in mid-April. To begin that process, and we're largely focused on a couple of areas. One is efforts around crime reduction, working with Lieutenant Colonel Ludwig and eventually the rest of the staff. Policy work, following up on some of the policy recommendations that we had made with the department. And we are arranging, and Loretta can talk about, we are arranging for a workshop engagement around some of the human resources issues with the department, with the senior staff and members of the rank and file. So that's where we are. We're happy to answer any questions with regard to that effort. But I think it's important that I introduce Chief Hill, Loretta Hill, who has been focusing on some of the HR aspects of our effort and can talk a little bit about the workshop that we're lining up for the end of June. So Loretta, you want to join us?
Good morning. Well, it's afternoon now. Afternoon, thank you for having me. As Chief Oates said, I've had contact with, I just saw Mr. Becker, and we've had very good communications on the implementations of some of our recommendations. So very productive and good conversations on looking at those recommendations and how we implement some of those and which ones will take a little longer to implement. So I've been real pleased with the level of engagement that I've had thus far around the recruiting, hiring, transfer, promotion, D&I, those type of HR issues that we'll be tackling with Mr. Becker. As far as the workshop is concerned, this was one of our key recommendations, to have an offsite workshop to help facilitate dialogue, to make sure we're not just doing internally, not just doing outreach, but some inclusion, to look at the issues that are stymieing the department in moving forward through these race issues, through a number of other issues that are occurring. So we believe this offsite workshop, which will take place near the end of June, will give the department opportunities to discuss some of these issues and how the department moves together forward on these issues surrounding race and equity and inclusion. And so we're really excited about that. We've gotten buy-in from Chief Barden and her staff. And we have a great facilitator that will be working through those issues with us. And I think it'll be a great time for the department as a whole to dig in deep to some of the barriers that are occurring in the department and a roadmap to move forward. So we're really excited at Teneo to help facilitate that workshop.
Thank you. Any questions?
Who will be participating in the workshop?
At this point, and Dan, Chief, you can jump in. It'll be the command staff, and then key influencers within the department. We'll have reps from FOP to ESOP, DNI, someone from professional staff that's there, also someone from investigations. So what our intention is to have about 25 or so members throughout the department that are stakeholders and key influencers in the department to be part of that discussion.
Loretta, can you restate what the outcomes are expected in this session?
The outcomes are to move forward from this point where we are with the issues surrounding race, equity, inclusion, and also one of the outcomes is having some agreed upon goals that this group can work together on. Inclusive, not just outreach, but true inclusion, be part of the process or the decision-making that goes into potential policy or something like that. So one of the outcomes is to help move toward healing some of the divide that is occurring in the department, real by some people and perceived by others, but we want to tackle both of those, real and perceived. And then also some common key policies or key things that we can wrap them around. And so that coming out of that, they will have some things that they can work to, that they agree on. They may disagree on how to get there, but at least it's agreed upon that this is something that we can work together on. So those are a couple of the outcomes. And Dan, please, if you have any.
Yeah. If I could offer, having used this technique in departments that I've run, typically there's a period over the course of the 3 days in which there's an airing of issues, in a safe setting, well facilitated, where people are comfortable. From that discussion, then, is some areas of common interest on the part of the group, areas where there's opportunity for improvement. So, for instance, we mentioned in our report, the rank and file. There was a common concern about promotion process in the organization, how special assignments are afforded, opportunities are afforded to people, those kinds of things. I fully expect that that kind of thing would come up in this workshop, and there would be a new perspective as a result of the airing of those issues. And then from that would likely come some sort of agreement to form a working group to work on some strategies to alter or change those processes in a way that people feel is an improvement, perhaps more transparent, more equitable, et cetera. And so what comes out of it, typically out of a 3-day session like this, is an agreement to work in the first instance on 1, 2, or 3 projects to improve the organization that everyone agrees are important to work on. And there's a mutual commitment to work in a collaboratively way on that. And so, and you progress from there. And most likely, several months later, there's a reconvening of the group, see how progress has been going. There's a commitment by the command staff to work on those issues. There's a commitment by the rank and file who are present to work collaboratively, be flexible, hear each other out, all of those things. And that's how sort of both progress is made on the specific issues and progress is made in terms of spirit of collaboration going forward that's helpful just generally for the organization.
Do you have any timelines in mind? I know that that's sort of difficult because you really won't know until after the retreat, but just in general, how do you see this trend taking place, or how long a period of time?
Well, I think one of the challenges for the leadership is to keep the group on task and set reasonable timelines. I think that a lot of that would depend upon what comes out of the workshop and what have folks set about to engage in, what particular problem solving have they set about to engage in. And that can even be part of the discussion during the workshop. How long do you think this will take for us to work as a group? And do we commit that we're going to, say, tackle this problem and come up with a new approach within, 6 weeks, 3 months, et cetera? There's a collective commitment by the group, because what will come out of a workshop like this is, in fact, work, collaborative work that has to be done, and people have to be committed to it. So that the schedule or timeline becomes part of the commitment. But there's an opportunity for the chief and the senior command staff to continue to drive these issues by making it a priority in the organization.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both of you, unless there are any other questions. Thank you both of you for providing this update.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So then the next, subsection would be an update on our work toward a body camera video release policy.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Chief Barton asked me to address you on this specific topic. It's been an ongoing discussion and an area of concern that we've had for some time, and that was reinforced by Teneo's recommendations, where we identify specifics to make a more robust policy than what currently exists. There's a lot, the approach of this policy would have to be taken with great care. There is a balance for the public's right to know, but also an individual's right to a fair trial. And that's something that we have to grapple with almost daily in our office, in our day-to-day work. We also have to align perfectly with applicable laws, policies, and procedures. That includes Missouri Sunshine Law, as well as collective bargaining agreements and the rest of our general orders or special orders. We have obtained policies from across the nation. Chief Oates sent us one from Miami Beach in Florida, and we've got about 9 other ones, including NYPD and LAPD. I think in our world, LAPD has probably got the gold standard on the way that they approach this and the manner that they deliver it to the public. It's very specific. everybody knows what to expect. So all those expectations are managed and everybody's on the same page, internally and externally. And this is also a process that will have to involve the county counselor's office, as well as Mr. Bell and the rest of the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, because we need their support in what we're going to do. And just internally in the department, this discussion will involve the Division of Criminal Investigations, specifically the Bureau of Crimes Against Persons, the Office of the Chief of Police and Public Information Office, as well as the Record Room and the Bureau of Research and Analysis. So we've got a lot of stakeholders that need to be considered as we continue to move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, can I answer any questions now?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned concerns about due process and sunshine. I wonder if it makes sense to get the county council sort of working on an analysis of the legal implications right now, and if they could provide us, and by us I mean the department, an analysis that could help, identify roadblocks or identify areas that we perceive as roadblocks that might not actually be roadblocks.
Okay. One thing I failed to mention is that we have to approach any of these incidents, these officer-involved critical incidents, with the same perspective. We can't pick and choose which ones we will or won't provide this information on. It has to be consistent and uniform, whether somebody thinks, this is a good shoot right off the bat, or hey, this one's very troubling. We have to have the same approach regardless.
I think that makes sense. I think having, a uniform objective standard is appropriate.
Are we working with Teneo for any of their suggestions, recommendations?
Yes, so Chief Oates presented us one with that he helped author for a department that he led. It's got a lot of good takeaways. We have to evaluate the best practices along with other departments, what they've already, the groundwork that they've laid, but also what is most appropriate here in St. Louis and in the Midwest.
So you have a committee working with you, or?
I don't know if I would necessarily call it a committee, but since it touches so many different units through the department, we've had the same people involved thus far, and that is even before it gets to organizations like the Police Officers Association or the Ethical Society of Police, if they're involved later on.
Do you have what you need to be successful?
I think so. I think we've got a lot of good relationships across the country where we can reach out for advice. And we furthered this discussion so far in the past that we were talking about a trip out to LA just to see it firsthand what they do. Now, their resources, their manpower are much different than our resources and our manpower. But they also deal with much higher volume, a lot more officers, a lot more citizens than we have. So we've just got to see what, if we can take away from the best practices and how best we can apply it here so that everybody in our region is best served by that.
Again, I guess the question for me is, do you have sort of a general timeline in terms of this, how long this process might take?
I don't, and I think it's complicated just because how precise we've got to be on the front end and just how many people have a voice in this matter. I would like to say sooner rather than later, but right now, as the policy stands, we have some flexibility on how we approach these incidents.
Wait, when you say as the policy stands, you mean right now, if there were to be a critical incident this afternoon, there's flexibility with how we would handle it?
Yes, and throughout all these discussions, we've ideally had the support and the buy-in from the prosecuting attorney's office as well. And we have strong relationships over here through a variety of different collaborations. I'm optimistic that we can accomplish that.
Because the goal is to get to some sort of objective standard for how we deal with it.
Yes.
When you do have a policy in place, is there going to be, do we have the resources to be able to process can produce the information that we're committed to producing?
That's a good question. And at our current capacity, I don't think that we do. I think we need to add at least one body, somebody with significant video creating and editing capabilities. I don't believe that that person exists in our department at this point in time.
Would this be a professional?
I would assume so.
So that's what you need to be successful, is that all? I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat, I just like to hear the whole story of how this is intending to play out, what you need in order to make this successful so that we can certainly support it. So come back to the question of what do you need to be successful?
Another body, at least either in the public information office or potentially in the body camera unit. Or maybe somebody that can kind of bounce back and forth or wear hats in both of those units, as long as they have that ability to create and edit video and the desire to learn as we're working our way through these things.
Is there anything the board can do to help expedite this analysis process or the buy-in and collaboration of the stakeholders that need to review?
At this point in time, I don't think so. I owe our financial folks a budget, a proposal for the 2022 year. I hope to include that body in it, and as well as the salary and fringes. So I hope that we can address those things on the front end and we feel much better about all of this moving forward in the very near future.
So other departments that we look at, they have a dedicated person to do that work.
Los Angeles has somewhere between 12 and 15 people. That's all they do, day in, day out. Right now, we would lean heavily on Ms. Clay, who's our social media coordinator. She wears a lot of hats, and I don't know how much more I can reasonably add to her plate and ensure success, especially when we are faced with a specific deadline that we have told the public, partners of media, and you guys that we would meet.
But someone with the skill set can come in and get up to speed pretty quick. I mean, if we found the right person, it wouldn't be a 6-month onboarding process, correct?
I wouldn't think so. We'd have to get them familiar with the department's policies, procedures, as well as the units that everybody that touches this in some way.
So the board originally requested the policy to be ready for our review in June. It seems like there's a pretty big to-do list still outstanding. Is June realistic? Is this summer realistic?
I would hope that the summer is realistic. June is pretty ambitious, just based on how complicated some of these discussions could be and how dependent we are on folks that are not necessarily within our span of control.
Would you provide updates to us?
Yes, ma'am.
I think the whole board agrees that this is something that is important and it would benefit the department or the department to have an objective policy in this area.
I think so, and everybody that has been involved understands the sense of urgency that this needs to be approached with.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
So the next item on our agenda is an update on the stakeholder retreat. We got a bit of a preview already. Is there anything else that the department wanted to present on that? I'm getting shaking. And okay. So we look forward to, we will have another board meeting before that retreat, but we look forward to seeing the results of that. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a review of I called it a strategic task list. I don't know if it actually has a name, but it was presented to us at an earlier board meeting with a list of items that the department had committed to working on. And so the board wanted an update on a couple of bigger picture items listed on that list. So the first one would be a review of the various policies.
Hello again. So the, I call them the 96 points that Judge Price had outlined prior to his departure. And big picture, I would say roughly a third have been completed, a third are in progress, and a third have not started. And some of the reasons for being in the not started category would be simply just funding. So, or we haven't come to an understanding with Teneo. For example, they make a recommendation that every commissioned officer from the chief on down should be wearing a body camera. The initial cost startup for that is $1.3 million. As Chief Hill was referencing, we've had some very positive meetings, her and I, regarding HR, and there's an emphasis there of their recommendations. They're not the gospel truth that have to be accomplished. So looking ahead, my hope is that after the stakeholder meeting, where we will be able to finally meet again face to face instead of Zoom and really have a good discussion on many topics, that we will be able to move forward more clearly on those not started categories. Like, I really don't think, frankly, that it's practical to do that, to implement the body cams for audit, because there's just not enough money. And so we want to come to an understanding on some of those. That's an example. Some of the other immediate or accomplished things that we've done, some of them were a misunderstanding. There was a misunderstanding on Teneo's part about the NBQs, not best qualified, of how we disqualify a candidate. And they just had bad information. And so we talked that out. They had a recommendation that it go through a chain and that there be a final decision maker. That process has been around as long as I can remember. So, and it's a very careful process, well investigated by background investigators, well thought out, well discussed prior to somebody being disqualified. So there's some of that, misunderstandings and so forth. There's funding issues that come into play. And I think, I'm looking forward to the retreat, if you will, because we'll be able to get through a lot of stuff where most of our Zoom meetings are limited to about 50 minutes. And that's just, we've already met 3 times. I have 3 more meetings scheduled with them, and I know the other divisions have been doing the same. So it's very time consuming. And I agree with Chief Hill, we've made a lot of progress. We've already done a lot of things right in the beginning. So I'm pleased with the process. Lieutenant Hampton's kind of the scorekeeper of all this. He's on vacation this week, but I did cull through some things last night and determined that rough statistic that we have about a third of the things completed, a third of the things are in progress, subject to debate, just like Sergeant Granda said, and then a third of the things we need to figure out if we're really going to do it or recommend it, and if so, then we have to ask for money.
Is it possible for Lieutenant Hampton or somebody else to provide updates? Like you said, he's keeping score. Is that information in a digestible, viewable document?
And so I would recommend that the next update occur after the stakeholder meeting, perhaps in July. I think if you do it every month, you may not see the lines being moved very much. I think you'll see, more specific change and accomplishments than like on a quarterly basis. But I think the stakeholder retreat is going to be significant. And as far as, moving along, but if it pleases the board, certainly we can, have another update in June too.
I don't think it makes sense to have, I think waiting until July seems to be more reasonable because you get more information. just sounds like it might just be regurgitated if you bring it back in June. Because there wouldn't be any outcomes. So I think if it went to July, I would have something that be a bit more tangible. That would be my hope, certainly.
Tangible and more detailed too, so, sure.
I concur, as long as there's a regular update following that.
Yeah.
And regular doesn't mean monthly, just there's a regular cadence of what we decide to, collectively decide that we want to focus on.
Agree.
I did have one question specifically about policies, because there were a lot of policy suggestions in here. And I know, ultimately we see the policies, and so we haven't seen them yet. Our policy reviews, are we, the department, engaging in policy reviews on some of these issues now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's the in progress category. I'd say two things about that with respect to Teneo's recommendations. It's in progress. We are working on them. As you know, the research and analysis unit, that's all they do basically. And they do a great job. And then regardless of the existence of Teneo, we're always looking at ways to improve. I mean, it might be that somebody brings up we do obviously an annual review of general orders, but it may be that somebody's looking through something and it could have been changed 6 months ago. It's like that, we need to fix that. We're as proactive as we can be, given the workload.
I think it'd be nice for the board to see, we looked at this policy because either it was up for its periodic review or somebody recommended we review it. And even when changes aren't made, it'd be nice, I think, for the board to know we engaged in this review of this policy and we didn't change it because of X, Y, and Z. We're already engaged in best practices, or the suggestion isn't feasible for our department or something like that. I think, would you all find that helpful?
Yes.
With some specifics.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What she said, I agree with her with some specifics on policies, particular policies, either they change or not.
So a memorialization of a reaffirmation, right?
Yeah, I think it would just be nice for the board to know, here's the world of what was considered. And this chunk is being changed and this chunk is not. Because I know that we have a lot of policies that are good policies and make sense for our department. But we as the board don't see, we see those policies, but we don't see ourselves looking at the policies and affirming that they are the best.
Yeah, I follow you. We'll talk to Lieutenant Hampton and we'll get that taken care of. That's, I understand.
Yeah. Thank you. So just to be clear, I want to make sure that we're in the right part of our agenda. That was the update on the strategic task list.
It was 6A, correct? 6A.
6A, okay, so 6B is a discipline matrix. I know we talked about this. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Sergeant Cunningham. I'm assigned to our Bureau of Professional Standards Office, and I've been tasked to speak about the disciplinary matrix. I want to preface my comments by letting you know that this is currently in the draft stage, so it is in policy review. That process is facilitated by research and analysis, and I don't have an estimate of when it'll be done, but I can speak to what went into composing it. We have a diverse group of investigators that we do all the internal affairs investigation for the department. We make a recommendation we make a recommendation of discipline, and the chief makes the final determination, after which we facilitate that discipline. So as a collective unit, we got together and we had the goal of wanting to be transparent in what goes into that process. We currently do not have a policy that speaks to the considerations of discipline. Our office has an exclusive database, and all of our investigations are confidential. All of our files are confidential. So as such, the masses, the police officers and the public alike, don't know those considerations that go into discipline. So as a collective unit, we got together and we wanted a policy that comprehensively covered all the considerations that we do in an investigation. And so that schedule of discipline can be transparent to everyone. We feel like that once it's transparent, that also addresses the perception of fair and equitable discipline. So the matrix that we compose, the first thing that we did was looked at a lot of departments that have comparable sizes, structure, rank system, a lot of similarities as us, and we looked at their policies, and then we looked at our current practices, and we molded a lot of that together to come up with what we have now. So in the current draft stage, we have 6 different categories, and then under those categories, it defines what goes into that. It also talks about progressive discipline. It talks about mitigating and aggravating factors. And what we wanted to do was we wanted all of our department employees, and again, the public, to know what our considerations were and to make that public and transparent, because currently we don't speak about our investigations, nor do we speak about the disposition of discipline that's imposed. So the perception may be, how did they arrive at this, or what were the considerations? And we wanted to make a policy that addressed those issues.
So when you say mitigating factors, does that allow a certain level of discretion?
So what we did in this matrix is each category has a presumptive discipline, and it lets you know presumptive based off if you meet this criteria, what that discipline would be. And then we listed what those mitigating or aggravating factors may be. So we also listed those categories so there, you know what we considered. And so then we would take that, and under the presumptive, it would have a lower level and a higher level above that presumptive that says if you met these aggravating factors, then it will rise to this level above the presumptive. So we start with a presumptive, and then it can either mitigate or aggravate.
President Cunningham, you mentioned it's in draft stage. When do you anticipate it'll be ready?
So that would be a question better suited for research and analysis. They facilitate that process. I don't have an estimation. At that point, once it goes in the draft stage, our office becomes a stakeholder. So at the point that people are making different suggestions and it goes to the review stages, we'll get to see it again and make some other considerations or some other changes, but I don't have an estimation of when that time frame may be.
Michelle, what's the process, or any of us, what's the process when something like that happens? What's the approval process that goes through?
There is an approval process. Once this policy is completed, we'll get to look at it here, our agency will. Then it has to be vetted by a number of different agencies to look at it to see what say-so they may have in it. FOP, ESOP, DNI, it has to go to the county council for advice or whatever. So it can be stalled at a number of locations, depending on what they have to say about it. Once we completed, the internal affairs look at it, our agency look at it, then it has to be vetted on for any other product.
That's the same process for any policy change.
We are working on making that more speedy.
I hope so.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
Next, we have coordinated agency-wide methodology to reduce crime.
Sorry, I jumped the gun on you a little bit there. I stood up for Sergeant Cunningham's presentation.
I'm surprised.
Yes, I apologize. Good afternoon, members of the board. The chief has asked me to kind of speak to you today about some updates to our crime reduction methodology. So before I talk about that, I'd like to jump back a little bit. We got this NAIL report back in December, and I want to read something to you so you kind of understand where we started the process. I got the report, I read the report. Obviously, as the commander of the Division of Patrol, I'm somewhat interested in crime reduction strategies. And so when I read in the report that Teneo felt that there was no overall planning, coordination, or strategic deployment of assets to assist in that effort, I took it a little personally. And at first, if existing members of the board, you heard me kind of vent a little bit from time to time about how diverse our precincts are and how complicated those crime prevention strategies could be. So I kind of went through a day or two of kind of, I guess, self-reflection, trying to decide where we are. And what I found after I did that was informally, we were very good at doing the things that they were concerned that we were not doing. So the precinct captains, the officers within those precincts are outstanding at developing these types of initiatives. We're not too good at memorializing what that looks like. So instead of kind of sitting there and being defensive about the fact that we really are doing this and they said that we're not, I took it as an opportunity. And when I really looked at it and discussed it with the precinct captains, what we decided is let's kind of incorporate what they're suggesting into what we do every day. Let's talk about it, let's memorialize it, let's make it part of our strategic plan. So that's what we did. And I guess to go back a little bit, particularly for you, Commissioner, we got the report in December. We were involved pretty heavily in a Jennings crime initiative during that time, and it was very, very successful. It kind of highlighted that we're pretty good at doing what they said we weren't good at doing. And I guess the timing of it kind of was somewhat concerning for me because here's this report that says that we don't do it. Here's this initiative that shows that we're good at doing it. So how do I marry the two up? And that's really kind of where this started as a foundation. So Chief asked me to pull together my own Division of Patrol kind of crime reduction strategy and at the same time pull together my strategic plan for the division for 2021. So I took the recommendations from the Teneo report, which are very simple in words. Timely and accurate intel, rapid deployment of resources, effective plans and tactics, relentless follow-up and accountability. Very simple concepts. We do that every single day. I made them part of my strategic plan with Division of Patrol for my crime prevention. That's my whole crime prevention strategy right there. And then from there, the chief took it and made it part of the whole department's strategic plan. So that gets incorporated every single day in everything we do. It memorializes all of our efforts. It summarizes everything that we should be doing and how we should be doing it. So I'm gonna go back. What we do on a daily basis in the Division of Patrol is we talk. I have division meetings every single week that are CompStat-like. Chief Oates and I have been talking routinely about what those look like. Statistical or planning analysis gives me the numbers, talk about them in a CompStat-like format. It's not CompStat like you see if you're familiar with it on television shows, where you sit up at the table and I grill you for 2 hours about what you're doing or more importantly, what you're not doing. What it is, it's just a memorialization and an accountability for what you're doing on a weekly basis. So we've been doing that since the first of the year. And more importantly, those meeting minutes get taken and it memorializes those efforts. So right now, if Chief Oates came and he did an analysis of the Division of Patrol for the department, I could drop a folder in front of him and say, here it all is. It's documented, this is what it was. We've taken some of their other recommendations, their top 10 list within the precinct, so we're targeting the most violent offenders in the precinct, and we're acting on those. And we're making quality arrests. We're taking bad people off the street. We've changed the way that we look at data. So planning and analysis has Teneo recommended the 7 and 28-day moving averages. I like 7, 14, 28. I like to compare crime trends. So they give us what we need to be able to make informed decisions. Let me talk a little bit about the Violent Crime Initiative. Commissioner, you may or may not be familiar with it, but I know the rest of the board is. Again, the Violent Crime Initiative is an expansion of the Jennings Project. So we took a very small area, we dedicated a lot of department resources, and it was a department-wide crime reduction effort. We expanded that with the Violent Crime Initiative to the rest of the county. And it's been extremely, extremely successful. You saw stats that showed you that aggravated assaults are up slightly from this time last year. I hate to see what they would be if we not have had this initiative. The effort now is to expand that so that get into the weeds too far with how we do what we do, but we do it more often. And so in order to do that, to make those decisions, we need data. So where do we go? And we have limited resources. Where do we devote those limited resources? We've changed based on Teneo's recommendation how we look at the data, and it's helped us. So again, an opportunity from the report to get better. The RIC has been extremely helpful for us. Chief Barton has worked very hard to develop the RIC. What we found when we started looking at these is we're not very good at talking to each other when we have big projects. So if you have a whole lot of people involved in an anti-crime initiative, there's a lot of information that gets lost in translation when that happens. Intel people are developing leads, people we should target. That information may not get passed on to specialized units to target that person. We need to clean that up. So RIC is going to help us do that. It's going to be our kind of central warehouse for disseminating information that we make educated decisions on enforcement. So that's really kind of the effort in a nutshell. The other thing I'd like to add is sometimes when you do big crime initiatives and you develop methodologies and things like that, some things get lost and you're not looking at what you need to. Chief has worked very closely, as the board knows, with CPE to look at our traffic stop data and some other metrics in terms of the population that we serve. I think it's going to be important looking at CPE statistics moving forward to ensure there aren't any unintended consequences to this effort. And when you marry all that up, I think you hit exactly what they're talking about when it comes to methodologies to these crimes. So, any questions?
How has your team reacted to these weekly meetings since January?
Well, at first, I don't think they knew what to expect. You know, with the pandemic, we had been doing a lot of remote type meetings. You know, they kind of came in with the same kind of mindset. Hey, you know, here's what we did last week. These are our issues. And I kind of hit them kind of hard at first. Okay, don't tell me what your problems are. I can see your problems from the slides. Tell me what you're doing about it. Tell me how I can help. And so now we're there. Now we're in good shape. But it took a little bit of time, as any transition does. But now they own it. You know, I don't have to do anything to sit back and facilitate the discussion. They come to the meetings prepared to talk about their issues and about what they need, and more importantly, things that don't work and how we can adjust on them.
So it's adding value.
Yeah, no question.
Have we compared our data since? I wonder if there's a way to compare our data to national trends to see if we can isolate what the violent crime is.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was having that discussion this morning. And I'd like to say, you know, Chief Oates and Ed from Teneo have been very helpful in trying to help organize data so we can compare those types of things. But the discussion I had this morning with Captain Laura, as a matter of fact, was, okay, if we have a 10% increase in aggravated assaults in St. Louis County, and don't misinterpret what I'm saying here, but is that a win if every other large city across the country has a 40% increase? So how do we compare that data to see where we are and where we need to go? So right now, that's what we're working on, to do exactly what you're talking about. I don't accept a 10% gain in aggravated assaults. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our efforts are having success based on national trends. How do we maximize that success rather than pitch the effort because it's not working? If that makes sense.
Yes.
Other questions?
First one's a comment. In that situation where you get information that stings like heck, right? So compliments you first on being stung. That's what good leaders do. Secondly, in the bigger compliment is thank you for getting beyond the sting to get to what the message that needed to be delivered was, right? There's ideas in here that we can use to make it better, and that's what we ultimately have to hear, right? Get over the sting, get over the pain, and get to what we're paid to do. So I compliment you and your staff on that.
I appreciate that. I didn't do that alone.
Appreciate everyone. So the net of that is you believe, based on what Michelle asked, that we will see better trends, perhaps even downward trends over time as we implement more and more of these ideas.
Well, I hate to make promises that I can't keep, but certainly the effort is there and will continue to be there, and we'll adjust as necessary to make that balance.
Is there anything that the board can help you with these initiatives to make it more successful or a more positive
I don't think so. I appreciate the offer. I think what we've found as we've kind of worked through this is, and we have bigger crime, not bigger crime issues, but we have not just violent crime issues within the county. For example, right now, catalytic converter thefts are our #1 issue. When you look at the slide and you see auto theft accessories on there and like a 400% increase in thefts, those are all catalytic converters. So, you know, our crime reduction methodology can't just address violent crime, it has to address all crime. And that little format, those 4 steps about intel and resources and follow-up, most important, are just as important with those types of crimes as they are for violent crimes. When we deal with violent crime issues, I have all kinds of resources at my disposal. I can bring in the task force, the strike force, specialized groups, PAC, SRU, and I can do the same thing with catalytic converters. That's just not as sexy. You know, if we have violent crime, they're out addressing that. They only have so many limited resources. So, you know, as we work through all of these things, trying to address every issue, you know, it's a challenge. So, but I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. So to answer your question, no, I think just having these discussions and being informed about the efforts and understanding exactly how hard the entire department works to address these issues and saying thank you, that means a lot. I know there are people out there listening that appreciate that. At this point, that's probably it.
Building on Michelle's comment, though, you'll come back to us if you need other things to be successful. If you
come to know me, yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to getting to know you.
And subsection D, community policing and the Bureau of Community Engagement.
Hello again. So just to give a little historical perspective on community engagement, back in almost a year ago, a little less, as with every chief, Chief Barton redid the organizational chart. So during this process of redoing it, which can become quite arduous, as Commissioner Ashworth has figured out, we had already talked about establishing a Bureau of Community Engagement. So coincidentally, at the same time when Teneo came out with their report, December 3rd of last year, they recommended more community engagement and so forth. We were already working on that. The policy, the reorganization chart came into effect December 16th. So the Bureau of Community Engagement was created with Captain Mann at the head of it, Lieutenant Williams, Community Outreach Unit, and Sergeant Nichols as the commander of the Diversity and Inclusion Unit. So some of the accomplishments that they have, it's very proactive, very interactive with the community, and I'll just run through a few of their accomplishments, what's going on, what's coming up, and so forth. One big issue is what was previously called the problem properties unit, which I will never say again, because we are reinventing it into the community outreach unit. And basically what it does is it assists people with real estate issues. It gives them the resources, it coordinates with other units in the department, other social services to get people with issues the help they need. It still will be a law enforcement arm also. Sometimes it's necessary to issue citations, apply for warrants to go through the municipal court on these properties. But for the most part, it's going to be a very proactive, help the person along rather than just confront them with and cite them into oblivion. So it's going to be a little bit different approach. It will still be very aggressive, but in a very helpful way. And I know that's gotten some recent attention, but it's going to be a good unit. We've got good people involved in it. Something struck me when we were doing a tour earlier of the Division of Criminal Investigation, how Lieutenant Longworth was very proud of all his staff. Well, I'm very proud of this entire police department, and that includes the community outreach units, a bunch of great people that really care about their community and are doing something to move it forward. So some of the other accomplishments, there was a recent, I think it received appropriate press, that there was a cleanup in Jennings involving the community outreach officers and some first precinct officers too. And the Capel kids, Careers and Pathways through law enforcement, they were involved and contributed a significant amount of time too. So that gave those kids an accomplishment. Capel is one of the components of the community outreach unit. It engages kids, it gets them involved with law enforcement. They have retreats where they're with the police officers. They understand that the police officers are regular people, just like all of us, and it brings that community, that sense of community together. On June 2nd, next week, we have a chess club sponsored event in Kahneman Park. It's off Lucas and Hunt in Jennings. It's from 1 to 4. It's open to the entire public. Chief Barton and I don't know how to play chess, but I told her that I would learn. So there's a UCAN meeting in July. It's Unified Community Action Network, and it's essentially bringing community stakeholders together to be able to communicate and understand each other and so forth. And as I said before, the Capel, they're going to be introduced to all aspects of law enforcement. A little different than the cadet program. The Capel kids are normally younger, high school age. The cadets are 18 to 21-year-olds working part-time, expected to be enrolled in college, and hopefully they move on in their careers here. We have several officers who were cadets. We have some professional staff that were cadets, and even if they don't move on, I think they become better citizens because they're involved in the police department, appreciate what we do. The Capel program's going on a retreat to Beaumont. We missed our retreat last year because of COVID. We had a retreat in 19 that was very well attended by officers, the kids, and we also were able to tag along with the Missouri State Highway Patrol, who's already been doing this program, and kind of learn from them, and then we started our own program. PAL, Police Athletic League, is officers involved with roughly 8 to 15 kids on any given day. We have a facility in North County where they can come and it's a safe place. They can interact with police officers. The police officers help them get to their jobs during the day, can sometimes pick them up from school and interact with them. And this is a 3-year grant program that's reaching a capstone. All the kids are in 10th grade and they're going to be going on a grant-funded trip to Disney World in June, and there's various officers that are participating in that. PAL officers also took some kids to 2 HBCUs. It was Fisk University and Tennessee State University, both in Tennessee, and that was a well-coordinated thing with the universities and to encourage the kids and expose them to higher education. And then PAL is also working on it's a partial clubhouse. It's a house in Castle Point right next to the park that the county owns, and we're hoping to get a couple rooms there in order to have a small-sized community center for the kids to go who live in that neighborhood. Not just the community outreach officers, but other first precinct officers participated in a Ring doorbell distribution. So Grant purchased it and the officers installed it. And some of the kids also assisted on those installations. The prosecutor's office is conducting a once-a-month community case review, I think is what they call it. And they recently had one on domestic violence. Our community outreach officers go so they can explain law enforcement perspective. Next month is officer-involved shootings. I think that's going to be very well attended. And what they're trying to do is educate the public on various aspects of domestic violence, how to protect yourself, how to process it, what goes on with the court, why are there protective orders, all the nuts and bolts of all the topics that they're going to do. So with the idea if the public is better educated, they're going to be better citizens at a crime scene and so forth. So the PAL is involved in 6 school districts, Normandy, Hazelwood, and New City, and also Hancock, Bayless, and Lindbergh. So we're all over the county with the police athletic league. And frankly, things have been slowed down significantly because of COVID, but now things are opening up and we're moving forward. There's a movie night at Castle Point Park on May 29th. And there's going to be other commitments throughout the summer on those kind of things. And then just shifting gears to the diversity and inclusion unit that's run by Sergeant Nichols. He's knee deep in the ABLE program, that's active bystandership for law enforcement. He's going to be there. He's already been teaching a significant portion of it. He's going to be there every Monday from June almost to perhaps the end of the year, so we get everybody trained. And that includes professional staff. They'll have a little bit different of a curriculum, but it's the same concept of assisting each other, knowing when to intervene properly and how to act after that. I already talked about the D&I consultants, so we're looking forward to getting their input. One of their first steps, and this is in the RFP, so I'm not revealing any secret, is they will come up with a survey. I know Commissioner Schwerin, you and I have talked about, we don't want to do overkill on the surveys and have them drowning in surveys, but I think this will be, because of the very professional nature of the consultants, I think it'll be a well-targeted, well-thought-out survey that we'll be able to pull information from and act accordingly. And then the other thing Sergeant Nichols is doing is implicit bias training to all our employees, and that's being done at the academy. And then lastly, real quick, it's not really community engagement, but it relates to the officers themselves. We have a wellness unit now. It's headed up by Lieutenant Roach. He's excited to give another presentation to you in the near future. And we recently had the wellness app that goes on an officer's phone and can coordinate services and give information to officers who may want it. And that was funded by the Police Foundation. So we have the contract signed. We're going to be moving forward with that. And then Lieutenant Roach is also moving forward on the peer support team. So the ultimate goal is to have 10% of the workforce be a peer support team member that's trained. We're going to start out in baby steps with 10 or 12 folks. And the idea is to train them to look for any particular problems or look when there needs to be support. So if I know you as a peer support member, I'll be able to lend out a hand, and hopefully these relationships will build. And I really see ABLE and peer support as partially going hand in hand, because ABLE is the intervention and peer support is the support of all of us. And that is the kind of the update on the community engagement right now.
Could you prepare a calendar at least for named a lot of events?
Yes, and I'm not sure if it's on the website, but it will be. And what we will also have is a historical perspective of what we've done. So we post a lot of things on the website. We post a lot of things on Power DMS, and all of that is open to the public. So I think the more the better, and we'll get that posted on.
I think what you're
So,
saying
I
is
was
for
saying,
us.
yeah,
For us, that's what you think you're saying. Might be,
Not,
might
not,
participate.
not the website. I'm just talking about can you provide something?
Yes, and you should be getting the email updates on these events, but if you're not, I'll make sure you will.
I just like to take a look at it, just a general look at, for example, what's going on. Well, this month is almost over, but maybe a monthly sort of something, just to give us an idea of what is happening, kinds of events in the various programs.
Sure, I understand.
Thanks.
We'll do.
But you do have an idea that I'd like to maybe.
What was that?
Maybe
I'm sorry.
your last comment on maybe we could participate.
Right, but the point is, it might be something that
Yeah.
we might participate in. I play chess. Might be something to participate in.
Yeah, I guess that really was the source of my question.
Yeah, that's what I figured you were going with
Yeah.
that, because there might be some things that would be good.
Just to
we were
show
there
up.
to show support.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes from our April 14th and May 7th meetings. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those meeting minutes will be posted. Amy, do we have any letters in communication?
I have none for you, ma'am.
Okay, that will be a quick agenda item to get through. Any old business? Under new business, we have several contracts to approve. I'll read them out in batches and ask for a motion to approve. We have a police service agreement with Bayless School District for 2 school resource officers and 1 designated police vehicle for the regular school year. A police service agreement with Afton School District for 2 school resource officers and 2 designated police vehicles. A police service agreement with a special school district for 1 school resource officer and 1 designated police vehicle. A professional services agreement with Valley Park School District for 1 school resource officer and 1 designated police vehicle. And a professional services agreement with Jennings School District for 1 school resource officer and 1 designated police vehicle. Oh, I'm sorry, and a police service agreement for Lindbergh School District for 2 school resource officers and 2 designated police vehicles for the school year.
Michelle, can you reread Jennings?
Yes, I was actually looking for a copy of those contracts because I looked through these contracts earlier. Jennings says 1 school resource officer, but designates a numeral 3.
And talked about it, 1, but it doesn't, 2, right? So
So does anybody have a copy of that contract? Oh, here.
Commissioner Swearing, yes, ma'am. This is Lieutenant Aaron Schaefer with the Police Contract Services Unit. That on the contract states that the Jennings School District is for 3 school resource officers and 2 designated police vehicles.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me read that again to be very clear for the record. A professional services agreement with Jennings School District for 3 school resource officers and 2 designated police vehicles. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 police service agreements with various school districts. Does anybody have a question or a comment or concern? You were about to say something.
No, I was just gonna make the motion.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that we approve the contracts for the school districts that were previously named.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those contracts are approved. Next, we have a professional services agreement with Metro Air Support Unit to approve a contract with St. Charles County and St. Louis City for regional law enforcement flight operations. A professional services agreement with ShotSpotter to execute a contract with ShotSpotter for a gunshot detective system in Glasgow Village. And a professional services agreement with the City of Clayton for the assignment of 1 police officer to the St. Louis County and Municipal Police Academy. Any questions, comments, or concerns? May I have a motion to approve these 3 contracts?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. These contracts will be approved. We have 1 general order to review. Chief, were you going to present that general order to us? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marissa Williams. For General Order 113, just a really brief overview on that. Mainly, it was revised to update information and resources within the order and add a subrecipient section, which is required by the federal government when we're applying for federal grants. Currently, county government doesn't have a policy, so having this will make us compliant when we put in for grants.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, concerns? I have a motion to approve the General Order 21-113.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the general order is passed. I believe we did not have any communications or letters, so that would address our public forum. The Board of Police Commissioners may vote to go into closed meeting for review of claims and lawsuits involving the Police Department, Section 610.021.1 RSMO, and Section 114.020.1 SLCRO, discussion of employee and personnel matters, Section 610.021.3 and 13 RSMO, and Sections 114.0203 and 13 SLCRO, and an update on union negotiations, Section 610.0219 RSMO and Section 114.0209 SLCRO, and specifications for competitive bidding, Section 610.02111 RSMO and Section 114.02011 SLCRO. May I have a motion to go into closed meeting?
I move that we go into closed session.
Second.
Amy, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwerin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Yes.
Now be in closed session. Thank you.
So
We need a roll call motion to return to open session. Is Amy on?
I told her she's there.
Okay.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Will you run a roll call to return to open session?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Banks,
here.
Commissioner Hassler,
Here.
Commissioner Schwerin.
Here. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Amy, may we have another roll call vote?
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
and Commissioner Schwerin.
Yes. Thank you all very much.